It went red and then it quit for some reason. Tell me when it's streaming.
As long as I don't have to read that dinosaur name again. We're good. All right, good afternoon and welcome to the City Council Oversight Committee meeting of Thursday, June 12th, 2025. One item on the agenda, the presentation of a report entitled A Place to Call Home, a community-driven plan for Norman's permanent shelter by the University of Oklahoma Student Government Association. I guess Mr. Hudson.
Thank you. So, hi all. My name is Hudson Harris. I am a University of Oklahoma student. I'm going into my third year. Over the past year and a half, we as a student government have started a project called the Home Together Initiative. And basically our goal was looking into the issues of the vulnerable population and housing insecure people of our area. So we kind of did this by going around talking to people, talking to residents, talking to nonprofits, talking to government officials, and going into the state government and talking to people there. But so what I'm here to present today is a collection of all we have learned, basically kind of looking at what the issue is, maybe some potential solutions, some ways of funding it, and yeah, let's go ahead and take a look. So, the current state of housing insecurity based on the 2027 national reports. So as you can see, wages are still lagging behind rent. As rent increases, wages still remain behind as an average and as a minimum wage. Assistance falls short. Only 1 in 4 eligible renters are able to receive some level of federal housing assistance. And an issue that we've seen, especially in areas like Norman and in North Dallas and San Antonio, which we'll look at later, new construction. New construction has a very disproportionate impact on the poor. Because new construction, you can typically make far more money by building multi-residential or like multi-family units. So building something like not multi-family units, single-family units. So building houses. Houses, you can get a much greater return on your investment, and it's much easier to create opposed to, let's say, apartment buildings. So new construction typically will just increase overall housing cost. Disproportionate burden. Many Black, Latino, Native American, and women are disproportionately impacted. All right, so the current state of housing insecurity in Norman, also based on 2024 reports. Norman's housing costs are surprisingly 38% higher than OKC and 20% above the state average. The housing wage, so basically the average wage for a full-time job to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Norman, you would need to make $19.91 an hour to comfortably afford that. So you can take a moment to think about the people who may need to live who probably don't make that much. Rent spiked since 2027, 18% for a studio and 9% for a 2-bedroom apartment. Median rent of $13,000, nearly 1 in 3 Cleveland County residents are rent burdened, meaning that their rent takes up more than 30% of their income. With the highest burden among Black and Native American residents. So, a snapshot of homelessness. So this is going to be based on the point-in-time survey, point-in-time count 2024. There's 91 unsheltered, 128 sheltered, either at the Norman shelter or at other community groups, Salvation Army, churches. 85% long-term homelessness and 52% chronic homelessness.
Could you define that, please?
Of course. So long-term homelessness is going to be not having a home for anywhere from like 6 months to a year. So that's going a long period of time without having a stable home. Whereas chronic homelessness is over a much longer period of time, having inconsistent housing. So you can think of it if we're thinking 10 years, if one person is maybe housed for 1 year or 2 years, out of that 10 years, they would be considered chronically homeless, meaning that they cannot get a permanent stable shelter or a permanent stable place to live. And then that is much harder for people to come out of because of the issues regarding jobs, getting small things like getting mail, things like that. All right. So currently in Norman, there are 245 beds across all type. The current Norman City Friends House has 52, and existing shelters at this point are pretty close to capacity. So let's look at the main barriers to housing. Landlord discrimination. Especially, you'll notice this a lot for smaller or cheaper units. Many landlords will be afraid to accept federal housing vouchers because they're afraid that they won't get the return on investment from the people. They kind of see them as untrustworthy tenants, and they're far less willing to give people who need some level of assistance for rent a place. So landlords can do things like require IDs or 3 times deposit. And at first you're like, of course, why do you need an ID? Many times these people don't have an ID. And while that is like the right for a landlord to do, we also need to fix that issue. Criminal records can kill a person's ability to get housing, especially a felony. Similar to those with federal housing assistance, landlords just typically won't see them as a trustworthy lender. And in places with high demand for housing, they have other options to go to, so they're not afraid to pass up on someone with a criminal record or who has housing vouchers. Limited case managers. The amount of people, social services and workers will never, ever catch up to this issue fully. And that leads a gap of people who don't have help, who are out without the support, without substance guiders, without social workers. And those are the people who you'll typically find causing the largest issues. Transportation issues. Transportation issues have been improved a lot by the bus system. However, there are quite a few issues with that. One being animals. While some people do allow animals on buses, it is not good practice and safe to have animals on board buses. And many homeless and housing insecure people will have animals to take care of and live with. So it's much more difficult for them to get around places when they're unable to use those buses. And secondly, carts. Many of their items and possessions are on grocery carts, like from Walmart or Target. And you cannot bring stolen materials on buses, so therefore they cannot transport those carts. So really the only way for a reliable sense of transportation is walking. All right, let's move on. Community efforts. So Norman has done a lot. Norman has done a ton. Issued 1,250 housing vouchers, new job programs, opioid settlement fund, SOAR certification, and ongoing talks. Public challenges. What we see coming from the residents, we see a lot of rising tension, a lot of people feeling like they have nowhere to go, and then people wanting them to go somewhere. This creates an increased level of tension, an increased level of emotion, and an increased level of conflict. People are not willing to budge on the issue, if it's constantly presenting more and more frustration for them. The city has been criticized in the past, especially with Food and Shelter Inc. And that issue. But the city has been heavily criticized from residents for inaction and action. Some state representatives really don't want us to even decide if we want a shelter. And the state of Oklahoma likes to step on Norman, for sure. But the thing that we hear all the time from community members is dignity and inclusion. What people say is that there's no place for us. There's no place out there for us. All right, so what has been done in Norman? Alrighty. So the City of Norman helps lead the Cleveland County Continuum of Care along with Thunderbird Clubhouse. So if y'all are unaware of the Continuum of Care, it's basically a coalition of around 20 plus members. These are like Salvation Army, Thunderbird Clubhouse, Transition House. So these are all programs that help vulnerable individuals in some way or another. So some will revolve around substance abuse, some will revolve around clothing, some will revolve around more religious services, and some will revolve around heavy mental health or shelter services. But basically is a large coalition all working together to help the vulnerable population. An incredible thing that I keep referring back to is the City of Norman has done it before. Functional net zero for veteran homelessness in 2018. That is an incredible accomplishment that many of you had a part in doing. So we've done it before. It's not impossible. And supported Build for Zero and 100,000 homes, housing 426 chronic homeless individuals. Alrighty. So the current shelter that the city has of Staken is on 109 West Gray Street, open since 2020, averaging about 56 beds per night. It's currently called the Friends House, operated by City Care with 52 beds. There have been past shelters on Webster and Comanche. Both have since closed. So, housing programs. As we mentioned before, the housing choice vouchers have definitely helped, especially those with consistent jobs and lower income. That was really able to step up and kind of give them the support they needed to get that assistance, and that has shown great success. ESG funds, that has been very helpful, and COVID era rental assistance. That is something that happened in 2020 and through 2022 to help renters during COVID era. Alrighty. So these are some community-driven efforts and some government efforts, but 24 guests have secured SSIs, 95 housing referrals, 300 advocacy logs, 30 ID vouchers, SOAR certification, and the Transition House receives 427 calls visits with $75,000 grant awarded annually. So those are some quick services that are provided. So the current community engagement and initiatives include the One Norman Task Force, the Beautification Job Program, and events for ID, birth certificate, felony referrals coordinated by OKC. All right, now we can get into it. So what we've heard from the community is that we need a year-round low barrier shelter. So that would be open 24/7 with minimal restrictions. An on-site wraparound service, mental health addiction, recovery, and job support services. Clean, safe design with trauma-informed care. Transparency, planning, and inclusion of lived voices. Access to basic needs and stabilities. Alright, and I want to go a little bit more in depth into kind of what all this means. So what is, actually, we'll do this. Alright, so as we did our research, we looked for 5 main criteria. It needs to be minimum 5 acres, so it is a scalable location within half a mile transit route, so walking distance, buffered from major residential zones, non-adjacent to elementary schools, high traffic commercial hubs, and compatible with zoning. All right, so some of the potential locations we identified do have that residential map, but we'll just jump into our ideal location. All right, so our ideal location, you have heard of it before, the Griffin Memorial Land and land owned by the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. So they own this land and they don't want to give it up. Is it that they don't want to give it up or that they don't want to talk to people? I don't know. But that is going to be our best location. It is located near downtown. It is currently further away from the current location and across a tree line. If we go back to our map, we can see that the current location, for the shelter will be right around that courthouse. And then the Griffin Memorial Land will be that green right above the greenhouse, right above the Walmart Supercenter. So there's also a tree line between here and the neighborhood along Main Street. I think that was an important thing to note already. But it has historically been used for mental health and behavioral services. So that land has already been used for very similar services. It's over 20 acres and has pre-existing infrastructure. There are multiple buildings there that do already exist. I will say a quick note on those is that they're very old and you can't just jump right in them. There will be a lot of maintenance and money needed to renovate those buildings. But they're still there and there's the opportunity to repurpose them. And then it's a very centralized site. Very good access to roads, very close to Main Street, close to transit, and yeah, it's very accessible. All right. So now I want to look at what other cities have done. So here's a place in Lawrence, Kansas. This I feel like is a very interesting design. So it is a 175 bed facility. As you can see, those little white blocks are actually singular rooms. So you can imagine a room about the full length of a bed, a full twin bed, and then it has a desk and a sink. And basically that's it. Air conditioning, has a bed, a desk, and a sink. And then in the building adjacent to it, they'll have showers, communal area, food services, all of that stuff. So this, I feel like, is a very interesting option because Lawrence didn't have that much money to go into this, so they had to innovate. And they came up with this, which I feel like is a very interesting option. I wouldn't say it is ideal, but I do think that it is a very good short-term potential option. All right, now, across the pond in UK, they supported 430 housing individuals in housing complexes. So that's very similar to the palette where it's just a small room, sink and a desk, but instead they built it in an apartment building complex, followed finished model, housing first with heavy intensive support, achieved 70% reduction in rough sleeping. So that's going to be people sleeping on benches, the people that you see at night. So they achieved a 70% reduction in, I would say, visible homelessness. And they are now scaling the model region-wide. Now, my favorite one, San Antonio, the Haven for Hope campus. San Antonio has seen a sharp rise in homelessness since 2000, and especially since the housing crisis. And their solution was a campus. So they decided, let's centralize everything and put it all in one spot. So they were able to shelter 80% of the city's homelessness population, and 88% remained stably housed after a year, with an 80% drop in downtown homelessness. But I think the coolest figure of all of these is $148 million saved annually. How do you save money? When there are people on the streets, they need support in some way. They aren't just going to not exist. You can't close your eyes and they go away. They're going to need money, they're going to need food, they're going to need support. They're going to need to sleep, they're going to need to sit, they're going to need to live. Businesses don't want them out front, they don't want to be outside. They don't have food, people don't want to give them money. So some people will steal. Some people will be so done with everything and feeling like they have no purpose and just start doing drugs every day. And that will just lead to more and more consequences and more money spent. That will lead to more police on the street, more emergency services, more people going out there, more business owners leaving. It hurts a community and it hurts individuals. All right, so our key takeaways, permanent low barrier shelters have significantly reduced unsheltered homelessness. Wraparound services have shown long-term success compared to simple housing first models. Retention rates are much higher for housing without barriers. So an example of a housing with a barrier is no history of drugs or history of crime. So those could be potential housing barriers. So retention rates are much higher when there are no barriers. Investments in shelter infrastructure lead to cost savings. Multi-agency coordinations and public-private partnerships heavily improve outcomes. And visibility and safety and stability improves for both housed and unhoused residents. All right, so how are we gonna pay for it? There you go, I knew that was all right, so the COC currently gets federal grants, and this is from a complete variety of sources all around. So these federal grants kind of vary in size and need to be reapplied for each year continually. Emergency solution grants are very short-term shelter prevention and rapid rehousing support. And then there's home investment properties, programs, and affordable housing. We have the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health and Substance Services, which ideally we can collaborate more with in the future, and help work with the wraparound services and the mental health support. State opioid funds could potentially be allocated for drug and mental health recovery services, but these are unlikely because the state and federal government does not want to give money for housing. These are the best options. Some American Rescue Plan Act, some ARP funds could be redirected. That I don't think is the best option. General allocations and sales could be a potential option. It's currently the main option. However, what I think would be the best option is a TIF. So we're wanting to build a, I know we're trying to create a new TIF. I think it's up north in Main Street. Yeah, so the main idea is if we get a TIF, we could have a very small portion of that be dedicated to funds for establishing a shelter with a small delegation for future years. So how it would work is the city gets the initial money, will purchase the land, own the shelter, and then they will give it to a private organization or a nonprofit, and then that nonprofit will step in, run, and pay the operational costs for the shelter. And the city will maintain ownership of the shelter and have the private nonprofit running it, similar to how City Care is now. Yeah. And so that's the main private-public partnership. And also, OU, we're here. Have we helped? No. I hate that. It drives me insane. But OU needs to do something. I'm not going to stop until we do something. I want you to know I'm here to work for the city of Norman with OU. I know many people from OU don't come here to talk to y'all, but I want you to know that the students really love this city and we well and truly care and want to make it better. All right, so our recommendations for council. Publicly commit to a plan. Establish a plan. It doesn't need to be immediate. It's important to take time and accept nuance and embed research. Select a feasible site. The Griffin Memorial Hospital is ideal, but it is not the only option, and it may not even be possible. So ideally, we'll be able to select a feasible site by the end of the year 2025. Establish a shelter planning task force. So this would be perfectly comprised from the COC. So kind of taking some of those members, sending out input, and in that way, they can bring in their expertise and their individuals who have gone through this stuff and bring that lived experience to the shelter planning and to the services. All right, begin funding a development strategy now. So it is time that we find some sort of way to put some amount of money towards this. I do think a TIF would be the best option, and I'd heavily incentivize looking into that further. And I'm here to work with and do full research to help y'all. Ensure transparency and community engagement. I know that people get riled up by these issues and people think you're hiding something or you're not telling them everything, but it's vitally important that us as residents and you as city council remain transparent and engaged to the community. Going out, talking to them, that's what I plan on doing all the time, and I want to make sure people care about this issue and that people know about it. And integrate wraparound services from day one. Establishing a shelter immediately and just throwing it out there, that won't help anything. That will likely just lead to more issues. It's vital that from day one, we have these services set up. So that is, again, why the shelter planning task force is very important. Being able to set up those wraparound services kind of before and making sure that while the housing is there, those shelter services are already ready and prepared to step in and help. That'll ensure the outcomes are much better and will heavily increase retention. If we open a shelter with no wraparound services, and let's say a person attends and then leaves, their retention rate might be a lot lower because they don't feel like they're supported in that location and they will choose to live on the streets much more often. All right, so we're ready to help. My biggest strength and kind of our biggest strength is our research background. So I am a researcher at heart. I've published quite a few papers, done a lot of mental health research and that stuff. But what we like to do is bring in the university expertise and bring in the educational aspect to government and kind of being able to support and step in for like these research projects and kind of some things that you want to learn more about or want more information about, but don't necessarily have the money to outsource to a research team. And we can help with OU and residents. That's what we want to do. We want to go out to residents and we want to talk to OU. Kind of act as a passage. You can bring stuff to me. You can bring stuff to our team. And we'll talk to OU. We'll talk to residents We want to help. We want to support you and them. And student volunteers. We have many student volunteers who want to help. And this doesn't necessarily just need to be for this. We as a community want to become more, as an OU community, want to become more engaged in our city. We want more students coming here, sitting down, meeting with y'all. We want more students going out to Main Street. We want more students exploring the city. We're tired of people staying on campus. We really are. So it's vital that we bring these students in here and have them engaged. But on a final note, we believe that everyone in Norman deserves a safe place to sleep, a place to heal, and a place to call home. Now, if you'd like to contact me, you can contact there. For general inquiries, you can email hometogetherinitiative@gmail.com. All right, and then if you're interested in references, here we go.
Go ahead.
All right.
I skipped ahead to the references for answers to one of my questions, but I'm really happy to see that you have used our unhoused information page. That was my direction to staff to put together.
Heavily use that unhousing page and referenced it constantly.
And that was actually done in an effort to fight misinformation.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So my question was, the survey that was conducted and presented in one of the slides,
Yes.
I was looking for that in the references. If we wanted to look at those survey responses, how would we see?
Yes.
The survey.
So that one would have been through either COC or Transition House's document. I can send the actual.
Yeah, I would
Thank-
love to see that.
I bet it was COC.
Who did you have convos with?
So be Heidi for Thunderbird Clubhouse, Transition House. I've attended the Continuum of Care meetings. I've talked with the mayor. I've talked with few representatives, Forrest Whitaker, oh my gosh, and Lisa Stanbridge, and man, I'm blanking, and quite a few people at OU, particularly in the student affairs.
And that leads to another question. Were you able to talk with any homeless OU students?
Yes, actually, we were. So we were able to do a few kind of small little interviews. Do we want to go into the homelessness and OU issue?
Sure. I'm
Alright.
curious because there's overlap. I know.
Alrighty, so a lot of times when people will come into Norman, especially as they're coming from out of state or international students, they'll go in, spend their first year housing in the dorms and on campus, and then their next year, they're thrown to the wolves. So Norman has one option or two options for upperclassmen housing. They have a dorm and then they have apartment buildings. So the dorms have a capacity of, it's very small. And so are the apartments, and they will fill up the day or two after the applications open and leave anywhere from 400 people on the wait list. And that's not even people who saw the wait list and just ignored it. So then they're left with the option of finding an apartment off campus. And the apartments off campus can be very expensive and very low quality. Because of the such high demand for student housing, many of the apartments can kind of just leave it with what they have, and they can keep increasing rent because more students are coming, the classes keep getting bigger, but there are no new apartments. So they can keep increasing the rent, and then that'll leave the people who don't get those OU support programs and aren't able to either afford an apartment, maybe they don't have a guarder, so someone to look over and sign the lease, and then they're left on their own. OU doesn't really offer any support or help for these people.
Do they keep track of how many students they are enrolled that are actually homeless?
So, kind of. Whenever you're kind of going in and filing all your stuff, there are questions that are asked about like your homelessness and your housing insecurity. So they do have some of the numbers, but
Freshmen, but not upperclassmen.
yeah, it's very inconsistent. You'll definitely know for the freshmen, for sure, but as you move like sophomore, junior year, if you become homeless in that time, there's a very good chance no one at OU would know unless you like directly went to someone and told them.
So OU, could actually beef up its counts of its population of students that are struggling for housing.
Oh, for sure.
And I'll just say as somebody who represents Central Norman and just approved like a 7-story podium parking student housing project, there are people who were upset because it will take out an affordable housing apartment complex. But when you put one of those in the community, that frees up the other low-income housing options, even though you are taking one out, for all the students to move into there and free up spaces. It's market compression. But that said, what I know Griffin, and it's not for lack of trying on Norman's part, may not be a tenable option. We still hope to make inroads there. But if not, since it wasn't on the slides, what were some other locations you identified?
Yes. So if I can go ahead and go to our map. So our main public locations will be, this is the location of Griffin Memorial. Let me point out where we are. Here we go. This will be right around here. Griffin Memorial, right here. And then the extended Griffin land that isn't necessarily the hospital will be right here.
South of Maine?
Yes, south of Maine. And then as we move over, the other public locations for veteran support services, the Norman Veteran Center is a very good option. So that will be a little bit further across, still very close to 12th Ave in the bus services, but a little bit more isolated. And then across is this parcel of land right here. It'll be one assessor. Currently, it is owned still by the Department of Mental Health Services.
So if the Department of Mental Health Services doesn't straighten out for a minute, that also isn't an option.
Yes. So now we'll look at.
Should they name a successor to Allie Friesen?
They have an interim.
Interim? Okay, good.
So some private locations. The biggest issue that we noticed when searching for private locations is land size. There aren't that many plots, especially close to Maine, that would have the land size needed. So we kind of need to move way out and pretty far away. But some of the options that we identified were, sorry, still getting used to this computer. Perfect Swing is one.
So off of Highway 9?
Yes. I have detailed reports on all of these locations too that I can send in addition.
Yeah, we would love to see that. I also like the recommendation for a shelter planning task force, and I could see council writing a resolution to direct staff to put one together. So other locations scouted. Oh, and I just wanted to touch a little bit on the multi-phase slide that you had. Let me get back to it.
Multi-unit.
I kind of thought about it as one of the examples was the San Antonio, but there was another slide that briefly touched on multi-phase project, which something like that would be.
Is it the Manchester?
No, it was San Antonio, but there was a slide in the very beginning that talked about the potential for a multi-phase project, which something like this would be.
Yes.
I know that if our perfect location, which would be south of Main on Griffin, that could see a day and night shelter, 2 buildings, you know,
Yes.
in the day they're cleaning, or I'm sorry, they're cleaning the night shelter during the day and cleaning the day shelter at night. We also talked about a sobering center in this general vicinity that we think would be very helpful. We know COCMHC is in this area. You have Food and Shelter for Friends, which has some permanent supportive housing in the form of tiny homes. With that, the thought is a capital stack. I know you identified TIF, which we do have TIF district master plans we're considering. But I would say a capital stack could include an affordable housing revolving fund, a stream of revenue coming off of that, since we have something where Crimson Flats, the developer is borrowing and paying back, and so we've talked about the creation of that could have a little stream. There's the talk of Norman Forward 2, like OKC Maps style, having some dedicated funding towards, you know, this could take a while, so either towards a night shelter or a day shelter, or maybe a sobering center. We also have opioid abatement funds
Yes.
that could, they're not forever, but that would be probably a good one-time use for programs associated with something that has more of a multi-phase component as opposed to like a pallet structure. I do like the housing first model, but I kind of see our situation as one that needs a holistic answer.
Yes.
And so I kind of think this is big because I would like to
It is a
see
little big.
some of what could be offered here elsewhere, especially permanent supportive housing, being further away from other populations who are still struggling with mental health and substance abuse. I would just like to set them up for success. And there's a lot of value in mixed income housing for the stability of a community. So those are just my thoughts, but thank you for putting this
I
together.
appreciate that for sure. I do think the capital, can you repeat?
Capital stack is just imagining various sources of funding that could stack together and make something that's multi-phase come online.
Got you. I do think that would be a good idea, especially, you said the developers you had some
We have
come from them?
Crimson Flats, which we used home ARP,
Yeah.
funds. I forget the millions of dollars that went into that, Anthony?
SLFRF funds, 5.5 million
That would come back to the city with interest?
in 30 years, yes. But as we get that online, yeah. So that would be like more of like a long-term, it will still need seed money from, if that's what council's willing to do from some other source. But like, maybe like, you know, there are several different things that have been thrown around, but yeah, that's the general idea, is that would supplement. Again, just like you were talking about a capital stack for the shelter, I think a revolving loan fund or a revolving, you know, housing fund is gonna also need its own capital stack for, you know, viability moving forward if it's like a
So
lasting.
maybe not quite with the shelter, but still in the Venn diagram of solutions that need to overlap so that we're addressing homelessness at all, you know, all its root causes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, that's it for me, so I don't know if anybody else has questions.
All right, well, thank you, sir,
Thank
very
you all.
well done.
Thank you so much. I think I'll just read this
Yeah, Bryce can do the thing. All right. Next item, oh, it's our favorite item. Next item on the agenda is adjournment. We are adjourned.